throughout history. Not all disasters arrived with explosions, screams, or visible chaos. Some came quietly. No alarms, no warnings, no dramatic final moments recorded by witnesses. These disasters unfolded slowly, often in the dark, while people slept, prayed, worked, or simply lived their ordinary lives, unaware that history was shifting beneath their feet. Tonight, we will walk calmly through the quietest disasters in history, not the loud ones you already know, but the silent tragedies that changed the world without announcing themselves. In the year 1815, on the remote Indonesian island of Sumbawa, Mount Tambora erupted in what would become the most powerful volcanic eruption in recorded human history, yet for much of the world, it did not feel like a disaster at all. There were no immediate screams across continents, no armies marching, no visible enemy. Instead, Tambora whispered its destruction through the atmosphere. Ash climbed high into the sky and circled the planet. The following year became known as the year. Without a summer, crops failed in Europe and North America. Snow fell in June. Hunger spread quietly through villages. Families starved in silence, never knowing the name Tambora, never seeing the volcano, never understanding why the sun felt weak and distant. Millions suffered, not from the eruption itself, but from its silent consequences. Centuries earlier, in the medieval town of Am in England, death arrived quietly as well. In 1665, a box of cloth arrived from London, carrying fleas infected with the bubonic plague. There were no explosions, no battles, no warnings, just a sickness that appeared slowly. One death, then another. Am made a decision that history would almost forget. The villagers chose to quarantine themselves completely, sealing their own fate to protect neighboring towns over months. Nearly half the population died. There were no mass graves dug in panic, no fleeing crowds, just church bells ringing softly, one funeral at a time, until even the bells grew silent. In 1986, the Chernobyl nuclear disaster occurred with surprisingly little sound. No massive explosion heard across cities, no dramatic collapse of buildings. Instead, a reactor lid lifted silently into the night sky, releasing invisible radiation. People nearby continued their routines. Children went to school. Couples walked outside. Firefighters stood on the reactor roof, unaware they were absorbing lethal doses of radiation. Many of them felt no pain that night. Weeks later, their bodies began to fail. Chernobyl was not loud, it was invisible, and that invisibility made it one of the deadliest disasters in modern history. In ancient Rome, disasters also came quietly. In the year 79 AD, while Mount Vesuvius famously destroyed Pompeii, the nearby town of Herculaneum met an even quieter end. When the pyroclastic surge arrived, it was not a slow burial of ash. but an instant wave of heat so intense that life stopped immediately. People did not scream. Their bodies froze in place. The town was sealed under volcanic material, preserved in silence for centuries, for generations. No one knew exactly what happened there. The disaster left no survivors to tell its story. Sometimes silence itself became the killer. In 1952, London experienced what came to be called the Great Smog. For 5 days, a thick fog mixed with coal pollution covered the city. Visibility dropped to near zero. Trains stopped. Ambulances could not navigate the streets. The air did not burn or explode. It simply filled lungs slowly. People went to sleep and never woke up. By the time the fog lifted, over 12,000 were dead. The city had been suffocated, not attacked. One of the most forgotten quiet disasters occurred in the Soviet Union in 1957, near the town of Kishtim. A nuclear waste storage facility exploded due to a cooling system failure. The explosion itself was relatively small, but it released massive radiation into the environment. Entire villages were evacuated without explanation. Maps were altered, names were erased. For decades, the disaster officially did not exist. People fell ill, rivers became poisonous, fields could no longer be formed. Yet there were no headlines, no documentaries, no global outrage. The silence was intentional. In medieval Europe, famine was one of the quietest killers of all. During the Great Famine of 1315 to 1317, endless rain destroyed crops across the continent. There was no single moment of disaster, no event to point to. Hunger simply spread. Bread became scarce. Animals died. Parents watched children weaken day by day. Cannibalism appeared in whispers. Entire villages faded away without records. History books mention the famine briefly, but for those who lived it, the disaster was slow, personal, and relentless. Even the ocean has delivered silent disasters. In 1945, the USS Indianapolis was torpedoed in the Pacific Ocean. The ship sank in minutes, but the true disaster unfolded afterward. Nearly 900 men were left floating in open water. There were no screams for help that reached land, no distress signals received. Over for days, men died from dehydration, exposure, and shark attacks. Many slipped beneath the surface quietly, one by one, until rescue finally arrived. Most of the world never knew they were missing. Some disasters are quiet because no one survives to tell the story. In 1979, in Iran, a sudden heat wave struck the city of Desful. Temperatures reached deadly levels. Power grids failed. Water systems collapsed. Hundreds died inside their homes alone. There were no dramatic images broadcast to the world. The heat simply did its work and moved on. History often remembers the loud moments, wars, explosions, collapses, But the quiet disasters remind us of something deeper, that destruction does not always announce itself, that suffering can spread silently, patiently, and invisibly, that entire generations can be changed without ever realizing what caused their pain. As you listen to these stories tonight, notice how many of them happened while people were simply living, sleeping, working, loving, hoping for tomorrow. The quiet disasters teach us that history is not only shaped by noise and violence, but by silence, neglect, and forces we do not see. And perhaps the most unsettling thought of all is this: somewhere in the world, right now, another quiet disaster may already be unfolding, unnoticed, unnamed, and waiting to be remembered only long after the silence has passed.